Chuka Okoro, a wealthy man in the bustling city of Owerri, Nigeria, had everything anyone could ask for: a big house, luxurious cars, and a successful business. However, there was one thing that haunted him every day: he had no son. Chuka had fathered 6 daughters, each more beautiful than the last, but none of them were the son he desperately wanted. He had been married to Nneka for over a decade, and while he loved her in his own way, he could not shake his disappointment that none of his children were male. Every time Nneka gave birth to another girl, Chuka's anger grew. He would call her names like useless and good for nothing. His disappointment would turn into cruel words. "Why can't you give me a son, Nneka? You are nothing but a disappointment," he would shout. Nneka would hold her tears back, knowing that no matter how hard she tried, she could not change what fate had given her. Little did Chuka know that his daughters would one day be the key to his redemption. When Nneka gave birth to their 6th child, a girl, Chuka's frustration reached its peak. He paced around their home, cursing the heavens for failing him. "I have 6 daughters. 6. And still no son," he yelled at the top of his lungs. Nneka, exhausted and heartbroken from years of trying to please her husband, lay quietly in bed, her face a mask of sadness. She had hoped this time would be different, but it wasn't. In the days that followed, Chuka avoided Nneka and their newborn daughter, whom they named Ugochi. He refused to even look at the baby girl, convinced that she would not bring him the joy he desired. Nneka, on the other hand, continued to care for the baby with love and tenderness. But in her heart, she knew that Chuka's treatment of her would never change unless he learned to value her and their daughters as much as he valued the idea of a son. As the years went by, Chuka's bitterness only grew. His daughters, Ugochi, Ifeoma, Chidinma, Ngozi, Amarachi, and Adis, grew up to be beautiful, intelligent, and respectful young women. But none of that seemed to matter to Chuka. He would often tell them, "Why don't you look like boys? What use are girls? I need a son." His words were hurtful, and Nneka could do little to comfort her children. They could only watch in silence as their father belittled them. One day, when Ugochi came home from school with an outstanding report card, Chuka looked at it and scoffed. "What good is all of this when you are a girl? It's just a waste," he said coldly. Ugochi, only 10 years old, felt the sting of his words, but she refused to cry. Instead, she promised herself that one day she would prove her worth, not to her father, but to herself. As the years passed, Chuka's business ventures continued to grow, but so did the animosity in his heart toward his daughters. However, his wealth did not bring him the happiness he thought it would. His constant anger and dissatisfaction with his life affected his health, and soon, he became ill. He could no longer work as efficiently as before. As a result, he became more dependent on his daughters than ever before. Yet, despite this, he continued to disregard their efforts. Unbeknownst to him, his daughters were growing more capable and independent. Ugochi, the youngest, had started a small business selling clothes online. Ifeoma, the second oldest, had earned a scholarship abroad and was studying law. The others followed suit, excelling in their respective fields. Their talents and hard work soon attracted the attention of influential people in society, and they began to amass wealth and prominence. Chuka's health began to worsen. He struggled with high blood pressure, diabetes, and a host of other health problems, making it harder for him to continue running his empire. One day, he collapsed at home, and Nneka rushed him to the hospital. The doctors informed them that Chuka's condition was serious, and he needed constant care. However, Chuka refused to rely on his daughters. He would rather suffer in silence than accept their help. But Ugochi, now an accomplished businesswoman, insisted on taking care of her father. She moved him into her house, offering him the best care money could buy. Chuka reluctantly accepted, still bitter but secretly impressed by the success of his daughters. However, he could not bring himself to apologize for his past behavior. He continued to mock and belittle them, despite their kindness. One day, as Chuka lay in bed recovering from another stroke, Ugochi sat by his side. Her eyes were filled with both compassion and disappointment. "Father," she said softly, "I've worked hard to build my life, and I've done it without a son, just like my sisters. Why do you keep treating us like we are less than you? We are your daughters, and we've done nothing wrong." Chuka was stunned by her words. For the first time, he saw the truth in her eyes. The weight of his years of mistreatment suddenly hit him, and he could not escape the shame he felt. I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice weak. "I've been a fool." As Chuka continued to recover, he began to realize how wrong he had been. His daughters had shown him kindness and strength that he had never expected. He remembered the countless sacrifices Nneka had made for him and their children. He had only seen his daughters as failures because they were not male, but now he understood that they were strong, capable, and worthy of respect. One evening, as the family gathered around the dinner table, Chuka finally spoke up. "Nneka, I'm sorry for everything I've said to you. And to all of you girls, please forgive me for treating you so badly. I now see that you are all gifts from God, and I am grateful for each of you." Chuka began to change his ways, slowly but surely. He started to appreciate his daughters for the unique gifts they brought to the world. He saw them as powerful, intelligent women who were making a mark in society. As he watched Ugochi expand her business and Ifeoma rise to the top of her law career, he realized that they were his legacy, not a son. He no longer saw them as failures, but as the successful women they were becoming. But his journey to redemption was not without challenges. His pride and arrogance still held him back at times, but with the support of his daughters, he learned to let go of his past mistakes and embrace the love they had to offer. As Chuka's health continued to improve, he started giving back to the community. His daughters, who had grown up seeing their father's selfishness, were now the ones teaching him the value of kindness and generosity. Together, they used their wealth to build schools, hospitals, and other institutions to help the less fortunate. Chuka, for the first time, felt true happiness, not from his wealth, but from the love he shared with his family. Nneka stood by him every step of the way, proud of the man he was becoming. "I knew you could change, Chuka," she said one evening as they watched their daughters work together to bring positive change to the world. "You just had to see the truth." As the years went by, Chuka became known not only as a wealthy businessman but also as a philanthropist who had learned to value his daughters and his wife. He had finally understood that children, whether male or female, were blessings from God. He no longer cared about having a son to carry on his name. Instead, he took pride in knowing that his daughters were carrying his legacy in ways he had never imagined. One evening, as Chuka sat with his daughters and Nneka in their living room, he smiled and said, "I may not have a son, but I have all of you, and that is enough. You've made me proud, and I am blessed to have you in my life." Months passed after Chuka's heartfelt apology, and he spent more time reflecting on the life he had lived. His health had improved, thanks to the constant care from Ugochi and the love of his daughters. He often sat by the window in his large sitting room, gazing at the world outside, but his thoughts were on his past. He couldn't understand how he had let his desire for a son cloud his judgment for so many years. He looked back at his daughters, each successful in her own right, and the guilt weighed on him heavily. What kind of father was I? Chuka asked aloud to himself one quiet evening. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of Ugochi's voice as she entered the room. "Father, are you okay?" she asked, her face filled with concern. "I'm just thinking, Ugochi," he said, his voice filled with regret. "I spent so many years wishing for something I thought would make me happy, a son. But in the end, I nearly lost the ones who truly mattered." Ugochi sat beside him and placed a comforting hand on his. It's not too late, father. We are here, and we love you. One day, while walking through their estate, Chuka was approached by an old friend, Mr. Yuzo, who had known him for years. Mr. Yuzo had heard about Chuka's health struggles and his transformation. He had also heard of the success of Chuka's daughters and wanted to congratulate him. Chuka, I must admit, I didn't think you'd ever change, Mr. Yuzo said, his tone friendly yet teasing. But you've raised some incredible daughters. I hear they are doing wonders for the community. Chuka smiled, a deep sense of pride swelling within him. It's not just me, Yuzo. They've done it all on their own. I'm proud of each one of them. Mr. Yuzo chuckled, well, you must have taught them well. Now, you know they say a father's influence is the most important. They've shown us that a father's love is just as important as any other. It's never too late to show them how much you love them, Chuka. Chuka nodded, and in that moment, he knew that he was ready to be the father his daughters deserved. He vowed to be more present, to cherish his family, and to show them every day how much they meant to him. As Chuka's health continued to improve, so did the success of his daughters. Ugochi's clothing business was booming, and Ifeoma had become one of the top legal advisors in the country. Amarachi, with her background in engineering, had become a sought-after consultant for construction companies. Addis had built a career in medicine and had opened a clinic that was helping thousands. Chidinma, the quiet but highly intelligent daughter, had even opened her own tech company. They were all flourishing, and they owed their success to the lessons they had learned from their mother's resilience and the strength they had developed on their own. One afternoon, Ugochi approached her father with a business proposition. Father, I've been thinking. We can expand the business and start producing clothes for a larger market. I've received an offer to collaborate with a major international brand. But I need your help. Chuka looked at her in surprise. Me? Help with your business? Yes, Dad. You've always been a great businessman, and I could use your expertise. You are well versed in the industry, and I am confident that we can successfully navigate this together. Chuka looked at his daughter with admiration, but a part of him still felt that he didn't deserve to be part of something so grand. I don't know, Ugochi. I've made so many mistakes in the past, and I'm not sure I'm the right person. Ugochi smiled and placed her hand gently on his. Dad, you are my mentor. I wouldn't be where I am without you. You've always been a great business mind, even if you didn't always show it. I need you now, more than ever. Together, we'll do wonders. Chuka was taken aback. The sincerity in Ugochi's voice melted his heart. For the first time, he realized that his daughters had forgiven him. They had moved beyond his past mistakes, and they were giving him a chance to be part of something bigger than himself. All right, Ugochi. Let's do this. Over the next few months, Chuka threw himself into the business venture with Ugochi. He was amazed at how his daughters had all built such impressive careers, and he found himself learning from them as much as they had once learned from him. He saw the leadership qualities they possessed, their compassion for the community, and the hard work they put into everything they did. His respect for them deepened, and he knew that he had been wrong all those years ago when he failed to see their true worth. One evening, after a particularly successful meeting with potential investors for Ugochi's business, Chuka sat with his daughters and Neka at the dinner table. As they laughed and shared stories, he felt a sense of warmth and contentment he had never known before. Do you know, Chuka said quietly, I never imagined this. I spent so many years focusing on what I didn't have, instead of cherishing what I did have. Neka smiled, placing her hand on his. It's not too late, Chuka. We've all come a long way. Despite the newfound harmony in his life, Chuka could not escape the regret that often plagued his mind. He would think back to the way he had treated Neka and his daughters, the way he had dismissed them for so many years. He wondered how much pain his harsh words had caused them. One afternoon, he sat alone in the garden, lost in thought. Neka found him there, sitting silently under the large mango tree they had planted together when they first moved into the house. She knelt beside him, taking his hand in hers. "Chuka, you're still thinking about the past, aren't you?" she asked softly. "I don't know how to make up for the things I've said," he replied. "I hate you and the girl so much, and I can't undo that." Neka smiled gently. "You don't need to undo anything. You've already done the hardest part, you've acknowledged your mistakes and changed your ways. That's all we could ever ask for. Now, we move forward together." As time passed, Chuka's reputation began to change. He was no longer known as the wealthy businessman with an obsession for a male heir, but as a father who had learned to value his daughters, a man who had become an advocate for women's rights and empowerment. He used his resources to fund scholarships for young women, started mentorship programs for female entrepreneurs, and supported local charities focused on education and healthcare for women and children. He also began to speak publicly about his journey, about how his views had changed, how he had once seen his daughters as less than sons, and how he had come to understand that both sons and daughters were equally precious in the eyes of God. "Daughters are not second-class citizens," he said in one interview. "They are leaders in their own right. I am proud to have raised 6 daughters who have become forces of change in the world." One evening, as the family gathered for a celebration of Ugochi's successful international collaboration, Chuka stood up to make a toast. The room was filled with laughter and the sounds of joy, but as he raised his glass, his eyes met the eyes of each of his daughters. "I may have failed you in the past, but today, I stand before you as a man who is proud. Proud of each of you and the incredible women you've become. I am grateful for the love you have shown me. You've all made me a better man. You've made me see that God gave us what we needed, not what we wanted." The room fell silent for a moment, and then, one by one, his daughters stood and hugged him. Tears welled in Chuka's eyes as he embraced them, knowing that their love and forgiveness had healed him. Years later, as Chuka grew older, he looked back at the incredible legacy he had built with his daughters. They had grown into influential leaders, each making their mark on the world in different ways. His once painful longing for a son had faded completely, replaced by a deep sense of fulfillment and pride. Chuka spent his days in peace, surrounded by his daughters and grandchildren, knowing that he had finally understood the true meaning of family. He no longer saw children as possessions or as means to an end, but as gifts to be cherished and loved, regardless of gender. In his final days, Chuka often reflected on his life. He knew that his journey had been long and filled with struggles, but in the end, he had learned the most important lesson of all, that God is the giver of life, and it is His will that shapes the course of our lives. Chuka had once believed that only a son could carry on his name, but now he saw that his daughters were the true legacy he had always longed for. Chuka passed away peacefully, surrounded by his daughters and Neka. As they stood together at his funeral, they each shared stories of their father's transformation. They spoke of the man he had become, loving, kind, and full of humility. The legacy he left was not one of wealth, but of love, respect, and the understanding that both sons and daughters are precious in the eyes of God. As they said their final goodbyes, Ugochi spoke softly, "Father, you have finally understood. You were the greatest father any daughter could have ever asked for. We will always carry your lessons in our hearts."